It's not often that I get to cover a car movie, and since I'm in the habit of covering movies for anniversaries these days, then why not cover a movie I was very fond of 20 years ago. The movie is a loose remake of the same name from 1974, in where the only similarities it carries over from the original is stealing a set amount of cars and that it featured a Cadillac that contained heroin. It was 48 in the original, whereas this is 50. I guess the writers wanted a more rounded number. Does this movie still hold up? Well, let's find out as we get back behind the wheel of Eleanor. The movie has a very simple premise. Memphis Raines has 3 days to steal 50 high-end quality cars, or his younger brother Kip is to be killed by Raymond Calitri for botching a car theft order. The writing has a very fluid pacing in that you get to know these characters very quickly with their quirks and traits. Particularly with Kip just using a brick to smash a showroom window to start stealing a car rather than taking the more subtle way of trying to pick a lock, and to see Tumbler, Atlee and Joey conversing whilst waiting for Kip and company to return. We see very early on that Memphis is just trying to live a very quiet life by teaching Junior go-karting, having retired from being a car thief at the behest of his mother so that his younger brother wouldn't be inspired to follow in his footsteps. It's an angle we occasionally see in movies in life where we've chosen to walk away from a situation that would likely cause us frustration, and yet circumstances force us to be brought back into this scenario for the sake of a friend and or family member from being spared. But this is what makes Memphis such a good leader. By definition, a good leader will put the wants and needs of others above their own, and here he is trying to get his brother out of harm's way from Calitri putting him on the chopping block because he botched a car theft by not delivering the cars required. And surprise, surprise, we have a British character as a villain in Chris Eccleston's Raymond Calitri. For as much as I have enjoyed this movie down the years, I do find that this is a trope that hasn't aged well with time due to the fact that it's a writing cliche that movies have done when they need a villain, or when they cast Greg Ellis in the role of Welter in Knight Rider SG. But to his credit, Eccleston does his job well.
Do I look like a
Is this a trick question? Tropes aside, the writing does a stellar job of making Raymond bad to the bone and making it feel cathartic to see the protagonist prevail against him when the Raines brothers decide to get a little retribution, especially when Memphis decides to take it out on his carpentry. Well, that's one way to end a board meeting. I feel like the chase with Eleanor and the police was something that the audience had to earn. All the heists of the cars had led up to this moment, and this was the final car needed to satisfy the order for Calitri's delivery, and it's a heart-stopping experience with the well-maneuvered corners and evading the cops. Only piece I cringed at was seeing the secondary characters having to retrieve the laser-cut transponder keys from Hemi the dog due to him eating them, and then having to wait until he passed them. I know it said you have to get your fingers dirty on occasion, but I don't think they meant it in that context. Nor will I. I do like the themes of family, friendship, and loyalty in the movie. The crew will do anything to help one another out. Kip is determined to stick by Joey after he unwittingly gets shot, and Memphis puts it all on the line with the thefts and the penultimate car chase throughout LA and Long Beach with Eleanor. All just to save his brother. In terms of the writing, it's junk food for the brain. It's not particularly new nor thought-provoking. It's just a good action popcorn flick that's designed to get the pulse racing for a good time. And this movie does that. Nicolas Cage does a grand job of carrying the movie on his back. He makes Memphis likeable and a competent leader, and a very reluctant leader at that. Giovanni Ribisi as Kip I found to be jarring with his performance, as I always found him to be too laid back. Now, if that was the intent, then okay, he did his job well. But I just found his character to be not that likeable. Chi McBride I found to be very likeable with his comic relief delivery in lightening the mood when things would get too serious. Particularly when Memphis and Kit would argue about his involvement in the car operation when Memphis was trying to keep him out of it.
This is why I do not do business with family.
Chris Eccleston does well with the material he has to work with and just makes Raymond that guy you want to see get pummeled for being a jerk. Angelina Jolie acts great as the only female member of the crew, and her charisma as Sway is very refreshing with how she interacts with her love interest in Memphis and how she participates in the thefts. Delroy Lindo performs excellently as Detective Castleback. It's weird when you have a protagonist that could be seen as an antagonist when you take into consideration that he's trying to stop Memphis from fulfilling his job of stealing 50 cars. You can make the argument that Eleanor, the 1967 Shelby GT500 Mustang, is a star of the movie because her appearance and use in the movie is heavily built up, and once Memphis gets behind the wheel and selects her as the last car to take, all the action focuses on her and she does not disappoint as the car performs like a pro. And with other supporting cast members like Robert Duvall, Vinnie Jones and others, providing performances with their own quirks, particularly Vinnie's, in which he speaks for the first time at the end of the movie after being mute throughout.
If his unpleasant wounding has in some way enlightened the rest of you as to the grim finish below the glossy veneer of criminal life and inspired you to change your ways, then his injuries carry with it an inherent nobility and a supreme glory. We should all be so fortunate.
Then you have a well-rounded cast with characters that feel real and relatable. Most of the effects of the movie are with car chase sequences between Castleback's car and Eleanor through Los Angeles and Long Beach. About the only visual effect that seemed to be present was Eleanor jumping over the accident on the bridge that seemed to be mimicking Kit from Knight Rider. And oddly enough, it would be another Shelby Mustang that would portray the star of the show in 2008 with Knight Rider SG with the GT500 KR, also known as the Kit Stang. There's really not much else to say with regards to effects, as they do their job and they keep you in the story. Trevor Rabin provides the score for this movie, and I'm particularly fond of the piece that is used as Memphis is making his way to get Eleanor, where it almost sounds like the kind of music that you'd hear if you were in a dreamlike haze. And I think that's appropriate, because Memphis's hang-up is having never stolen Eleanor properly before, as previous attempts had ended badly. And the action sequences are supported with these great driving pieces that really enhance the experience to where you feel like you're there. I did find it weird with one soundtrack that used Crystal Method's Busy Child, as those that are familiar with the FIFA video games will know that this was also featured on FIFA Road to the World Cup, also known as FIFA 98. So being a soccer fan at the time, that did distract me upon hearing this when the protagonists are fleeing the warehouse in the opening scenes. It's still a good track, but if you know where it had been used previously, it can be a little jarring. Despite that critique, the score and the movie's soundtrack delivers in bringing a lot of genres of music from rock and roll to electronic and hip-hop to the story. The movie is what it is. It's a great popcorn flick. Well cast, great action sequences, and a satisfying payoff at the end with a brother saved and Memphis gets Eleanor at the end of it. The movie did receive mixed to negative reviews from critics, including nominations for Worst Screenplay and Worst Haircut for Angelina Jolie at the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards. But it's become something of a small cult classic over time, including car mod restorations opting for the Eleanor model of the 1967 Mustang that portrayed said car in the movie. It made $237.2 million against a budget of $90 million. Which, for circa 2000, is not a bad turnaround. It's one of those movies you can put on any time for under 2 hours just to watch some high-octane field fun. I'm MJ Knight, and we rode again with Eleanor for Gone in 60 Seconds. It's not often that I get to cover a car movie, and since I'm in the habit of covering movies for specific anniversaries these days, then it only stands to reason to cover a movie I was quite? What's a quite? It's not often that I get to cover a car movie, and since I'm in the habit of covering movies for specific anniversaries these days, then why not cover a movie I was very fond of back in 2000? One more try. It's not often that I get to cover a car movie, and since I'm in the habit of covering movies for anniversaries... Really? Well, time was clearly not on my side there. And I hear Lids groaning in, in exasperation. Yeah, I know. Alright. We see very early on that Memphis is just trying to live a very quiet life by teaching Junior go-karting. Having retired from being a car thief at the behest of his mother so that his younger brother wouldn't be... Ugh. Right there. Right there. If, dialogue is like a hurdle, I get to that last hurdle and it's like... That was dark. There's really not much else to say with There's your nightmare fuel. Now imagine Tim Curry as Pennywise doing that. Like, Lid's like... And Raider's like, I hate you, MJ. I hate you. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. There's really not much else to say with regards to effects as they keep... Ugh. It's going to be one of those evenings, ain't it?